Okay, so this is the introduction to Chapter 7 on cash and receivables. I do the appendix, some of the appendix in Chapter 7. So we start off with Learning Objective 1, which are, what's cash and all of that good stuff. And then we go on to Learning Objective 8, which is basically your control features of cash. And that's specifically, we work on the petty cash and bank reconciliation. And then we move on to receivables of various sorts and go through the rest of the chapter. So all the sections on cash and most of accounts receivable for this chapter, it's going to be 95% review, and we'll go through that pretty quickly. The new items is a lot more detail of what is cash, and you have to know a little bit about accounts receivable. The new thing in there would be probably the net method of recognizing accounts receivable. So cash and receivables, not too bad. The section on notes receivable, we get into a lot more detail, especially on the disposing of accounts receivable. That's going to be pretty much 90% new material to you on the disposing of accounts receivable. Just for your time, your planning of your time that you need to take on this. Resources to help you in the chapter. You've got the textbook. You've got the Chapter 7 section on Blackboard, where there's the videos. There's my notes there that go along with it. And a lot of times when I'm doing the video part, I don't cover everything in the notes. So you may want to, if it's helpful to you, use both. You've got work-throughs of exercises and problems, so you can do the homework. It doesn't help you to just read what I've done. You work through the problems and then see how I work through the problems, and that may help answer some of your questions. There'll be a quiz on each chapter, and then you've got the whole Wiley Plus resources available to you as well. So the intro to the chapter, the actual chapter in the text, starts with Luck of the Irish, and this is sort of on reporting cash. And it's a real-world example of how, when you see cash on a balance sheet, it may not be the actual amount of cash that's actually there. So Apple was reporting cash of $98 billion, but $34 billion was in the U.S., and the rest was overseas in subsidiaries. And so the cash reported on the consolidated financial statements was not all available. And the definition of cash is it's supposed to be available to pay your current liabilities if it's listed as cash. And this has to do with the various tax laws. The old tax law prior to 217 made it not a good idea for companies to bring their cash back into the U.S. just because of the tax implications. A new law passed in 2017 which makes it easier for companies and encourages companies to bring the cash back into the U.S. And so the government expects to collect about $339 billion in taxes on the one-time charge to when all this money comes back. And then you might ask the question, the whole idea of making the tax changes here to get cash to come back into the country is that, the companies will invest it, they'll hire more people, they'll pay their employees more, it will benefit our economy. And so there's a bunch of different options of what you can do with this repatriated cash, the cash that's come back in. You can pay higher wages to your employees, you can do better products, R&D for your customers, or you can do stock buybacks and things like that, or you can pay more dividends. So Forbes magazine, they have an article on this, and they projected or predicted that most of the cash would go to paying more dividends to the stockholders. And that would get their earnings per share and all of that stuff up. And so what they've actually done so far is some of it went to the employees, about 15%, and 60% went to the stockholders. So you can sort of, the whole point of that was just so that you're aware of the sort of the outside situation where things are not as simple as they appear at this level of accounting. So when you look at cash, you have to look more into it and say, okay, so is that cash really available? What else is going on here? Okay, so that's the intro to Chapter 7. You may want to use the, I have in the intro section, you have the what you need to know, and that can be helpful as you read through the chapter to answer it. I also do a chapter outline, which I have to do, so I figure I make it available to you. I don't know if that's helpful to check things off as you learn them. But anyway, so that's the intro to Chapter 7, and next we'll move on to cash.